It's time for ACC Central, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Monty Taylor and Jake the Jester McKeever.
Welcome back to College Baseball Central, ACC Central. Grace just got a funny look at our off-brand intro video. Grace Nugent from Inside Carolina is with us to talk about North Carolina. We are going to talk about a number of teams, but as you can see, the major overarching theme for the beginning of this episode is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Joined by Jake McKeever and Grace. Grace, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I love all the school spirit that you guys are demonstrating today.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Is on the shows we like to show off the different schools, and since we can't do that in press boxes because it's unprofessional, a little bit tacky. I judge people who do it. I also don't want somebody to confuse me for somebody who works at the school and ask me a bunch of questions I don't know the answer to. But I like to get into the fan spirit on these shows. So, Grace, you have been lucky enough to be at both scrimmages for North Carolina so far this fall. Unfortunately, you're not going to be there for the Fall World Series this weekend because you will be doing some fun stuff back in your home state of Texas. I just realized I'm outnumbered by Texas people on the show about the ACC. But Grace,
well, Monty, that is ACC country now.
Not in baseball. SMU somehow does not have a team. But Grace, talk to me about a little bit about overall what you saw from the team from a general perspective over those two scrimmages.
Well, it's a very different team, obviously. Like the biggest names from last year that arguably led the team to Omaha generational player, one of the best players that I've ever seen in college, probably one of the greatest players in North Carolina baseball history. Vance Honeycutt, gone. Casey Cook, gone. Anthony D'Onofrio, gone. Shea Sprague, gone. They missed so many pieces. So this team has a lot. When I started the season, I had a huge question mark in the outfield because I basically knew where everything else was going to fit. But that is a big thing. The lineup will be changed. There's a lot of new arms coming in, a ton of new freshmen. So it's just a really new look. And I was intrigued and a little bit, I guess you could say nervous. I covered the last year's team for so long. It's different when you have a new team. But some of the new guys that head coach Scott Forbes has brought in and the rest of his staff, I think, are really shaping up to be some really interesting players. And it'll definitely be a new look team. It'll be a different brand of baseball. It's not going to be as explosive as it was last year. But I think with this team, they have a chance to be better than most people think they will be because Forbes is really good at kind of cherry picking these guys from D2, D3, JUCO, and really giving them a great intro to the D1 environment. And then if all the pitchers are healthy, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're arguably going to have one of the best and the deepest staffs, and not just the ACC, but if they have Jake Knapp and Folger Boaz back and Jason DeCaro, those are 3 Friday night starters that you could have in a weekend rotation. And I think it could be one of the scariest pitching staffs in the nation.
Yeah. Did you notice that maybe the base running was more aggressive than normal in the scrimmages? I only saw 3 innings the first Friday, and it seemed like they were taking first to third literally every moment they could, and they were attempting to steal a ton of bases. Was that the impression you got over the full 2 scrimmages, or?
I think most definitely. I think partially because how the lineup will be set up is just going to be a little bit different than last year. You're not going to have the pure hitters like Casey Cook and Parks Harbor, where more often than not, I can see them being in a situation where they can get the RBI. And so they've definitely been a lot more aggressive on the base paths, especially with Kane Kepley has been in the leadoff spot for the past 2 games. They're doing 2 scrimmages. They're doing a longer first one and then a shorter second one. And the longer first one is shaping up to be more what I think the lineup will look like heading into the spring. And Kane he's such a gritty player. He's not going to have none of these guys are going to have like the speed that Vance or Anthony did. But this level of grittiness and hustle and maybe even a return to small ball might be what we see from this team. Kane is just I watched him on the Cape all summer. He broke the Hyannis Harbor Hawks walk record that was previously set by Robin Ventura. And I mean, you'll see him hit like a deep fly ball to center that's 100% going to be caught by the center fielder, and he's to second by the time it's caught. And he even runs out his walks like Brandon Nimmo, or even you could say the late great Pete Rose. He just has this level of aggression and grittiness. I would want him to be on my team. I don't think anyone is going to like that they have to face Kane Kepley. And I think with him being in the leadoff spot, being a little bit smaller in stature, maybe more unassuming, they're going to have him steal bases. They're going to have Tyson Bass, who's probably going to be right behind him, steal bases. I think Gavin Gallagher is going to steal some bases. Alex Madera can steal some bases. So they have a lot of guys that I think they're going to try to be more aggressive on the base pass, especially in the fall, so they can figure out who can really run well, and then they can kind of make those adjustments in game in the spring.
You mentioned Kane Kepley. For those of us that aren't around the UNC program, he's obviously filling the shoes of Vance Honeycutt. What kind of player do you think he profiles as, and what do you kind of see his floor and ceiling after the year?
Well, he's not Vance, and those are where all of, I think, I mean, the comparisons are going to come from that because, I mean, the last person you had broke so many records at the school and was like the generational five-tool prospect talent, and Kane is not that. He's a different player, and I think the comparisons are slightly unfair. First off, Vance is 6'3". Kane is like 5'8". I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He plays just such a scrappy style of baseball. He in the box really well. Because he's a little bit smaller, it's harder to pitch to him, and he just has a fantastic eye. If Vance was breaking the records for first round draft pick with the most strikeouts, like Kane would do that with walks. They're kind of antithetical when it comes to how they behave in the box. He's really disciplined. He has some pop and he has some power. In the first scrimmage, he was able to blast a homer out of the Bosch. They're going to be different players, but I think Kane is going to be a really good, not just in the box, but as a center fielder. There's a few times in their last scrimmage where he was throwing some absolute ropes to the middle infield and even to the catcher because he has that arm strength. And no, it's not going to be Vance. I don't think he's going to be as maybe dynamic, but I think he's really going to anchor this lineup and bring kind of just that fire and that juice that you need for everyone else. And he's a junior. And Scott Jackson, his former head coach at Liberty, is here at UNC. And so I think that duo especially, they're really going to have some magic cooking, even if it's not the same that not the same thing that UNC fans have been used to for the past 3 years.
I didn't realize he was only 5'8" because I've seen some videos of him hitting, and I actually wrote down Eric Hosmer was my comp, but I guess with 5'8", we can go ahead and throw that one out completely.
Yeah, Kane is on the smaller side, but I actually think that's a huge asset. It makes it so much harder for some pitchers to you can't really steal anything on him. Like he will make you pay if you have one of those mistake pitches, or he's gonna draw a walk, and then if he draws a walk in over under about 2.5 pitches, he'll be on second base.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Kane Kepley. I mean, I watched him a bunch over the Cape, and he is very good. I mean, it's just going to be an adjustment getting used to no Vance. I know sitting there with you when guys were going out there, there's a freshman named is it Perry Hargett who's wearing the number 7, and I'm just like, that is not Vance Honeycutt. Thankfully, he was playing second base, so I wasn't too confused. If they'd thrown him in the outfield, that might have caused some issues for me, but. Let's talk about some of these guys that have transferred in that are kind of under the radar because they've gone to smaller schools. Let's start with Tyler Bass, who had a monster day the other day. I want for those that are wondering, he went 4 for 4 with a triple, 2 home runs. Just an absolute monster day. He's a guy who had a lot of numbers at the D3 level that are great and could have a huge year. We've seen guys from the D3 level as recently as just last year with Jacob Ferentz and Ben Watson in the ACC blow up, making that jump. Grace, what were your thoughts on seeing him? Because he was hitting the ball pretty hard the first game too.
Yeah, his exit velos, I think, I mean, I don't have all the metrics, but of the scrimmages, his exit velos have been the highest on the team. And I talked to Forbes preseason, and he told me that I think a lot of people are going to be surprised about how like tooled up Tyson is. And I was like, I mean, are you sure? Like the last few outfielders you had, they were very competitive, but he has really delivered on that. And I found a story. So he went to North Carolina Wesleyan, which is where Coach Forbes went. And in his very last at bat as a Bishop, he had tied the career home run record. And in his very last at bat, he broke the career home run record there. And his dad told me that like that kid was just swinging for the fences, and the exit velo on that ball apparently was pieced. But I mean, on Friday he home run in the first inning, and that was 112 off the bat, and then second inning he hits a line drive that was 114 and an RBI, and then the fourth inning he hits another home run at 112. The fifth inning he draws a walk, and then he's still second, and then in the eighth inning, he hits a line drive triple that was 116 off the bat.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Like,
By the way,
what more could you ask for?
Yeah. Also,
where does he fit in the lineup? Oh, sorry, Monty.
Real quick, Jake. I want to apologize because I called him Tyler Bass, and it is Tyson Bass. I'm a Bills fan, and the kicker's name for the Bills is Tyler Bass, so I got a little thrown off there. But it is Tyson Bass. But go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
I would say, where do you kind of see him fitting into the lineup? Do you think he's going to be a middle of the order guy that's going to be counted on to drive in runs? Where do you kind of see him sliding?
I think they're going to keep him kind of at the top, and they put kind of the same lineup out there for these two scrimmages. And I think what people aren't exactly factoring in is that Luke Stevenson isn't playing at all this fall. And Gavin is playing, but Gavin played a lot, and I think that his ceiling is really high. Like I think he's going to be like one of the dudes on this lineup, and he was hitting, I think, in like the 6 hole. So I think I would see Tyson more being in that 3 or 4. What Forbes has done in the past is he's put the guy who gets on with the highest OBP. So last year, a lot of times it was Vance in that leadoff spot, which I think is going to be Kane. I think Kane is built to be a really good leadoff guy. And then I could see either Tyson hitting right behind him or hitting third. And last year they had the luxury of the entire lineup was left, right, left, right. I don't know if they're going to try to do that again this year. But you also have power guys in Hunter Stokely and Sam Angelo, who are more going to be your last year's Alberto Osuna, which might be, okay, we're swinging for the fences. It's going to be a double, or it might be a strikeout. So I could really see Tyson at either 2 or 3, or if you want him in the middle of the order, 5. But I would keep him near the top, especially if he has these exit velocities and he's finding the ball as well as he did in the last few weeks.
Yeah, I really, after seeing them in person and then seeing some of the stats, looks like they've done a really good job scouting and bringing in guys. Like you said, I figured they were resting Luke after a very long season. I believe he played in every game but one, or even then it might have been every game. But that gives you a chance to see Dye, who is a really good transfer who played a lot at Liberty as a freshman.
Yeah, I think, well, I've gotten to see a lot of him, luckily, because he's right now their number 1 catcher. He's looked good. He, like Jason, graduated in 3 years, so he's a little bit young, but he had his year at Liberty. He did pretty well. Most of his RBIs at Liberty were in big situations, and I think one of the problems, not that it really showed on Luke, because he was still blasting home runs, like game-tying home runs in the Super against West Virginia, but he caught almost every single inning. Especially as a guy who's a draft-eligible sophomore, like his agent, Coach Forbes, they're going to want to rest him a little bit more, and they do really need another option at catcher who can catch the midweeks, catch a game or two. That's not going to be a huge defensive or offensive drop-off, and I think Mac has a really good possibility to be that. He's made hard contact. He's flown out a ton, but he's able to make hard contact, and he's adjusting to that. And I think having Jackson there is really helpful because talking to both of them, they love Scott Jackson. For Kane, Scott Jackson is the reason he transferred. If Scott Jackson hadn't, left, then I think he'd probably still be at Liberty, even though he is from North Carolina. He's from Salisbury. So I think Mac is a really good second option, and I think you're going to need that because Luke caught so much, and Luke is such a valuable player. He's so good, but sometimes you just need to rest him because that's going to be better in the long run.
Just to go to somebody that's, I guess, on the complete opposite side of the scope, Hunter Stokely obviously missed all of 2024 with an injury. How has he looked in the fall, and is there any kind of rust that he's knocking off, or what's kind of been his MO this fall?
He's done really well this fall. He's also had some pretty high exit velocity hits, and his problem was a wrist injury. And I think one of my favorite Hunter Stokely moments was 2 years ago, they played against a series against Miami at UNC, and the night game, I think on Friday, it started pouring. And so they had to delay it in the middle of the game and then start the next game and then resume that game in the morning and then do the next game as basically a doubleheader. And Hunter hit like a walk-off double to win the first game. And it was a perfectly placed ball, beautiful line drive, just a sound off the bat, gorgeous. And he's kind of looking like that again. He's getting back into form. There might be a little bit of rust when he actually is facing maybe not pitchers he's seen every day, and more live at bats. I could see him kind of either starting slow and then trending up, or having a little bit of a dip in the middle of the season just because he's getting used to that many college at bats again. But I think him at first base, and I loved Parks at first base. I don't think there's a hitter like Parks Harbor, but Hunter at first base, he's done the splits a few times, and it's only the fall. Like, he's ready to go. And his defense at first base, I think, is going to be really important, just with the fact that the infield might be a little bit more volatile. We don't know the status of Jackson Vanderbrake on his waiver with the NCAA. Perry Hargett might be primed to take second base as a freshman. So I think Hunter there, both in the box and on the dirt, is going to be really valuable to the team.
Yeah, we briefly mentioned Gavin Gallagher a little bit earlier. You mentioned him possibly getting some rest soon, hopefully, because he also had a long Cape Cod season as well. He's looked really good this fall. I think he's homered on both scrimmages, right?
He homered. He didn't homer in the second one. He did homer in the first one, which looked a lot like his walk-off grand slam against LIU. Yeah, I love watching Gavin play baseball. There's just, I think, something really poetic about how he's an infielder and just like his swing in general. He's also just a hilarious person, but he's a great ball player. He was coached by his dad for most of his life. He went to Pro 5. He was actually roommates with Macon Winslow, Duke's catcher, as I think a senior. But I think he was one of those X factors last year. But I think that this year he's going to hit an even bigger boost. He has the athleticism. He has the range. His summer on the Cape wasn't amazing. He hit 202. He had RBIs. He had 2 homers. He had 5 doubles. A lot of those YD games got caught early due to darkness. But he and I talked about it on the Cape. It's just to get better, get reps in. And, I mean, Casey Cook hit like 196 in the Cape regular season when he was there, and then went from hitting 3 homers to 17 homers and was a third-round draft pick by the Rangers. Not that Gavin is going to do the same thing, but I think they have the same kind of trajectory, and I'm really excited to see what he can do, because I think he and Luke especially will be huge energizers in this lineup wherever they fall.
Yeah, and for those that are wondering, I did interview Gavin. It was released last Thursday, so it is available on our YouTube. He is a fantastic talk. He is a fun guy, and he even followed up. Like, normally I do like, oh, thank you, like I do a thank you tweet, but he was like, hey, it went pretty well, huh? And I was like, oh, you're in tune with when I actually released it, because it had been a couple weeks at that point. But no, Gavin's a great guy, easy to root for. Pretty interesting guy. But now we get to shift to what appears to be the real strength of this team, and that's the pitching staff. One of the guys I wanted to talk about is not one of the guys you've already mentioned, but it is the guy who I think has started both the 2 scrimmages, and that's Kyle Percival. He's looked really, really good. I think he went 6 up, 6 down in the 3 innings I saw, or the 2 innings of his I saw, with 4 strikeouts. I mean, what's been your impression of him?
Well, so when he came in as a freshman, they were really, really excited and high on him, but I just don't think all of the things exactly clicked. But he's like 6'5". He has the projectability, he has the length, he has the athleticism. His pitches have the stuff. And so I think one of the reasons he did really well this summer, he was in the Cape for like 2 weeks. And then the summer before, I believe he was in the CPL and he pitched really well for, I want to say something with the Sox, the Burlington Sock Puppets, maybe. I don't know exactly what he was in. He did one of them. But I think they're really trying to push him to kind of lengthen him out so they can have a lefty starter.
Uh-oh. Looks like we've lost Grace for a second.
We lost her for a second.
I'm gonna pull her off
for her to come back here.
Yeah, if she comes back, we're talking UNC baseball. She got froze a little bit. We were talking Kyle Percival, but lots to love about this UNC team that I think can get a little overlooked with the lack of huge moves made in the transfer portal. I think they got a lot of really good guys that I think are.
They have a lot of guys coming back though. I think that's. Yeah. Olin Johnson.
I'm back.
And she's back. All right. You froze right as you said. I think they're stretching out for a lefty starter. Okay.
Yeah, I think they're trying to stretch him out for a lefty starter and hoping this year everything can come together because Shea left. I don't know if they were completely planning on Shea leaving. That was up in the air, but he got drafted by his hometown Boston Red Sox. And then they also brought in from the transfer portal Tom Chmielewski, who I will be calling Chewy because that is a very long last name. Tom, I talked to him when he was in Falmouth this summer. He was supposed to be Princeton's Friday starter, and then he got hurt right before the season. So I think the rest on him, especially where he's a little bit more of a similar pitcher like Shea, like he's going to need to get those feel pitches back. So I think they're really trying to hammer in the he and Kyle, something like that. And they've just seen more of Kyle than they have of Tom. I'm really hoping it goes well for Tom. He was a great person to talk to, especially like he and Jake Knapp both getting hurt before what's supposed to be their senior seasons. Like you only want to root for them. And in terms of like Jake Knapp, if we're talking about this like theoretical rotation, so you don't have anyone get injured. I mean, last year, if we were talking at the same time, I would be like, oh, we have all these options. And then if you gets injured, you never know what happens. But I mean, you theoretically have Jake Knapp, who I had heard before the season last year, he was getting up to 97. Like this would be your dog. This is the guy that you're really like scared to face. You would have Jake Knapp. You had Folger Boaz, who took over the Friday role and then also got hurt. You have Jason DeCaro, who was the de facto one, pitched for Team USA, was a 17-year-old on the mound half the time, pitched in these really stressful situations and regionals and supers and Omaha. And that's not even talking about your older bullpen arms, your Cam Padgett's, your Olin Johnsons, your Kyle Percivals, all these guys that they really have worked to develop so they can hopefully lengthen out. And I mean, if no one is hurt, knock on wood, it goes well, you can have like bona fide 5 fantastic starters. And that doesn't even take into consideration any of the freshmen. And you have this kid, Cameron Seagraves, who flipped his commitment from Campbell to UNC, who's coming in as Perfect Game's #1 right-handed pitcher in the state. Not that that means it's going to contribute to, outs on the field and strikes called, but you have some really interesting arms who have a chance. And Forbes started he's a pitching coach, and he loves to tinker with his pen and his starters, and he kind of whittles it down to 8 to 10 guys. And I'm so excited to see like what he's got for us. It's going to be really fun.
You kind of touched on Folger Boaz. Obviously, he was the starter before he went down. What is his timetable for the spring, and where do you kind of see him returning into the rotation?
So he hasn't thrown in games yet, at least that we've seen. Maybe he has, and they just haven't told us. But I think when they initially announced it, his return was sometime around November. So I'm thinking both him and Jake, they might start back a little bit slower. He might start coming out of the bullpen or a midweek game. I know our first series opening day at the Bosch is Texas Tech. I don't think he'll be starting that Friday, but I could see him work his way back into that weekend rotation. If it was me choosing, I actually don't know what I would do. I need to see Jake and Folger throw, but you have some really, really good options for that, and I can see himself working back into that weekend rotation because that's just the type of pitcher he is. That's the type of human he is. He's going to put his head down. He's going to work. And I think, I mean, I don't know if the Texas Tech opener is public knowledge, but
I was gonna say that's what I was like. I was gonna touch on it, but I was like,
that's well. I also know some of the guys on the Tech team, and I've been told that. So
I've heard it too.
there.
I think it's very close to public knowledge, but not like that's why I was.
Well, the ACC also releases their schedule way later. That's a little bit my beef with the ACC. I've known the SEC schedule for months now.
Yep.
I can guess most of the ACC schedule. I'm not going to know it, but I mean, I'll just tell you that the opener is Texas Tech. So sorry if that gets me in trouble. That's what the opener is at the Bosch. I'm super excited. My little sister goes there. It's going to be great. They've got some great pieces too. But I mean, back to the original thing. Folger,
that is public knowledge, by the way. Tech posted it.
Perfect.
So I don't.
Folger,
it's public from Tech.
I think he can work in well. I think Jake's going to be the most interesting thing because I think Forbes might have this problem. It's not really a problem. You have like 2 or 3 aces. What do you do? And also it's this whole like mental component of who's starting on Friday. Friday night starter, huge, set the tone. But I mean, I could argue that a Sunday starter is even more important because you're either going to take the series, you're going to sweep the series, or you're going to make sure you don't get swept. And they talked about that last year. Like their biggest character win was that Sunday at Miami after they got like run ruled in the first game. They lost by 1 in the second game. And then they showed a ton of fight and they came back and won that third game. And Shea Sprague was starting that. And he started arguably some of the biggest games of the postseason. So I would argue that I'm not as much concerned with that Friday starter as some people might be, but I really can't wait to see who that Sunday starter is going to be. And a lot of times he tries to pick, like originally it was Shea, a more veteran guy. And so I'm excited to see that.
Well, you've got Aiden Houck as well, right?
I like him out of the bullpen.
I
think his stuff and some of his stuff is absolutely nasty. I would rather have him out of the bullpen so he can just like hammer for like 2-3 innings, maybe one of those long relief guys, kind of like Dalton turned into the, oh my God, we need someone to fix this situation. I would love if Aiden could be we need someone to fix this situation. And then Matthew Mateus could be the closer. That would be one of my dream scenarios. Don't know if that will happen, but that's kind of what I've been thinking.
And what about that group of freshmen, talented freshmen? Obviously, you had DeCaro and Boaz breakout, but you have another 2 or 3 guys that were really high caliber freshman arms that didn't necessarily have the best freshman year. What about them? Do you see one of them making the jump, like a Boston Flannery or Nolan Johnson?
If I had to pick, I would say Olin. I'm high on Olin. I might be a little bit biased because I saw him pitch a ton at the Cape. And we had some great conversations about like the mental fortitude side of it, which for him, I think that was his biggest issue. And also his second start that he started was at ECU. And he had been like sick the entire week before, like lost like 10 pounds type of sick, and then pitched. Yeah. And it did not go well at all. And so for him, that really put him in like a hole mentally and just, I think, from a numerical standpoint. And so we talked a lot this summer about his mental fortitude and trying to matching up his pitching ability with the mental side of it all. And his team, the Harwich Mariners, ended up winning the whole Cape League, which no one thought would happen, especially because they had a massive slide in July where out of 17 games, they won 1. And the one game they won was Olin pitching against Cam Paget at Doran Park. And I think Olin went 4 innings, I think 4 hits, 0 runs, maybe 2 walks, and he came off the field after, super smiley, all like 6, 7 of him, and was like, "I didn't let the walks get to me. Like, I just went out there and hammered, even if it wasn't exactly like huge strikeout numbers. It was a big like mental push for him." And he talked a ton about just some of the older guys he was with. And so I think that if anyone's going to make that jump, it would probably be him, just with that mental piece. And I mean, he's 6'7". So if you have a fastball coming there at 93 miles per hour, it's going to look more like 96 miles per hour. And he also has this, his fastball, it'll sometimes look like 2 different pitches, and it's the same 4-seam fastball. And I don't think he knows how he does it either. But I can really see him kind of making that jump and being one of those guys that either jumps into the weekend rotation, like those really important Coastal Carolina midweek games. But I'm really high on him. I think if any of those sophomores, kind of besides your Folgers and your Jasons, like it would be him.
What do you think of Boston Flannery? Obviously, he was a highly touted freshman coming in. He started a few games last year, struggled with command. Has he kind of made any progressions going forward? And is there anything he's kind of tweaked to work on, the walks that he had last year?
Well, he was actually also on the Cape. I get to use all my Cape stories for this, my inside knowledge. And I walked by him. He played for Brewster, who was just loaded, by the way, with talent and somehow didn't make the playoffs. Someone tell me how that works. But I walked by him one day before he was scheduled to probably pitch, and he was journaling. And I was like, "Boston, what are you doing?" And he was like, "Well, Vance told me I should start journaling. Maybe that'll help me." I don't know how much it might have helped him, but he did. I think he is really working on limiting the walks. Command has always been his issue. He pitched a few of the scrimmages, and the command battle is still kind of there. So I think it's going to take more from him. It's also a mental piece. He did, I think on Friday it was 2 innings pitched, and he had 2 strikeouts. And it took him a little while to get there, but he eventually got there. So I think just the more time he gets on the mound, the more comfortable he's going to be, because he can get that fastball up to anywhere from 94 to 96. Like, he is more one of the flamethrowers that you could kind of put in there from the pen, maybe for like an inning or 2. But his key will just be limiting the walks and finding the command, because he, like Olin last year, if he walked one guy, it would kind of start to spiral. And so as long as he doesn't let that happen, I think that his future could be a lot brighter and he could be a piece out of the pen.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to love, and I'm so glad that we're able to sit here right now and talk about it, and we could probably talk for a while. I know we're definitely going to have you back on at some point to talk more UNC ball, but I know the other day you had a lot you wanted to talk about. Did we at least cover everything, or is there anything that we missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we touched on my X factors. I think the biggest question I have is depth. Last year, all of these guys were being pushed by veterans that had a ton of college at-bats under their belt, and that really fueled the whole team. Like, Jackson Vanderbrake and Johnny Castanazzi had 2 huge postseason hits that fueled UNC, and just, like, I mean, the Tar Heels of last year just, like, had this vibe to them. Like, they were going after it and getting it, and not that these guys don't have it. I just think the question might be depth. Where do all of these freshman position players fit in? What are you going to do with the rotation and the pen? Who is kind of falling through the cracks that I haven't seen yet that is going to be like a big impact? So it's all just one really fun and intricate puzzle. And I know Coach Forbes loves to have his puzzles. So that's, I think, going to be the biggest thing. There's still a ton of question marks going into the spring. And who knows, we could see a starting lineup that's really different. But I think that their future is bright. They have a lot of potential. It just needs to see if they can put it all together and really tap into that.
Yeah, I can't wait to see. Thank you so much for coming on, Grace. You can follow her. She's a writer at Inside Carolina. You can also follow her on Twitter at Grace G Nugent. She is all North Carolina all the time. So. Well, that's not true, because this weekend you'll be in Burnt Orange. But
I will be rooting on my hometown Texas Longhorns against the Georgia Bulldogs. This is the natty year. You heard it from me. We're going for the chip.
There you go. So, Grace, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it as always. You're a joy to talk ball with. Can't wait to do it again.
Thank you guys.
And I'll let you go. All right, Jake. You didn't want to say goodbye?
Well, I didn't want to have us all talking there at once. So, and then that whole Texas thing, unfortunately, I think she's right about that.
So anyway, that was our North Carolina talk. It went a little bit longer than we expected, but I think there was a lot of good information there, a lot of quality stuff. Grace loves baseball. She covers, I think, everything for North Carolina, but it's clear listening to her that she is a baseball first person. It's always nice to pick her brain. That's why I kind of felt comfortable skipping the second UNC scrimmage, because I knew I could just tap her up for some information. Jake, you ready to move on from UNC, or did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Just before we kind of close the door on UNC, I mean, there's a ton of question marks for them, but I think they're question marks in a good way. Like you said, the pitching staff, like you don't know who your Friday, Saturday, Sunday guy is going to be, just because they have 5 different options for it. I think they're going to be a very boring team to watch in a good way. So I'm really excited to kind of see how UNC rolls through it and picks out who they're going to roll with.
Okay, all right, we'll move on.
Well, I can say more in a 3-2. Like you said, taking the first to thirds, not giving away free bases. I mean, they have a tremendous catcher. So I mean, they're going to be a boring, grinded out team to play against.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. But moving along, we're going to talk NC State. I know Kane's Cats Heat is dying for us to talk Florida State, but Florida State's actually 4th on our list. I'm sorry for that. We're talking NC State. They played Elon last Wednesday. I guess they scored it as a 14-inning game, 13-inning game. I can't remember how many innings, but it was 22-4. The offense that Elliott Avent seemed a little bit worried about didn't have any issues against Elon.
They must have watched the show because, I mean, they just came out just swinging. I mean, again, you can't watch these videos, so we don't know kind of what the at-bats look like or stuff like that. But, I mean, 22 runs. And I don't really see a lot of walks on here on the box score that you created for us, Monty, for both sides, for the pitching side and for the hitting. I mean, I'm counting. Had 2, Luke Nixon, Sosa.
I mean, Chris McHugh had 5 walks.
7 walks. 7.
McHugh, look at Chris McHugh. He had 5 walks against Elon. He had 1 registered at bat, 5 walks.
Oh, I thought that was 5. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I see you highlighting it, but maybe it was a walk. But I mean, again, the walks could be 2 different things. That could either be, hey, we worked into great counts, took our pitches, or Elon brought in a guy that couldn't hit the broadside of the barn because their 13th pitcher at Elon is an elite. But I mean, there's a lot to like again. I mean, there's a ton of power. There's a ton of extra base hits when you look at this box score.
To answer this question really quick, they currently have 40, which is what I think is 3 less than Miami has currently, and I think all the teams need to get down to, is it 30? No, they have
35.
35
is what Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball is reporting.
Okay.
And again, that is very, very common, though. I mean, I've heard numerous stories from guys that I played ball with that sometimes they carry 50, 60, 70 guys. I was at Mississippi State. I mean, they would keep tremendously high fall ball rosters. So, I mean, them cutting 5 guys, I don't think is out of the ordinary at all by any stretch of the imagination. There's 5 guys that could redshirt. Oh, there he is. 3 UNC guys. Well, Monty took his UNC hat off.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then I'll take this thing off.
Yeah. Another Texas guy, Monty.
Give me ACC power, Stanford.
We are joined by Micah, who just got to come over from doing a college football show that I completely messed up on producing wise, but looks like it went well.
We were 40 minutes, Monty. You missed the short show.
Oh, of course I did.
There's no way you did a 40-minute football show.
We had 2 blowouts in 4 games that were just all just dumb. So
the crowd loves Micah.
Oh my God.
So,
Where's Grace? Did I miss
you
Grace?
just missed her. I was
only
trying to hold
came
her.
here for Grace, honestly.
I tried to hold her as long as possible, but I told her it was only gonna be like 20 minutes, and it ended up
Actually,
being like
Monty cut
35.
her off, man. Monty cut her off.
I did not, but
I will say this: we could have spent 2 hours talking about UNC baseball.
yeah,
So,
Grace is a talker. We love Grace. She knows her Tar Heels. We're currently talking NC State and their scrimmage. They won 22-4 over Elon, and we were just talking about some of that because Mike, I don't know if you had a chance to watch our last show. You've been extremely busy lately. But they played Duke, and I didn't think anything of their performance necessarily against Duke until Elliott Avent expressed some concern about having to win with pitching and defense rather than relying on the offense too much. But they seem to have responded in a big way with 22 runs against Elon. That's Elon, the college, not Elon Musk. So
I thought that was the same thing.
Yeah, well, I highlighted some guys that I wanted to talk about for NC State in particular. Luke Nixon, he ends up going 5 for 11 over the 3 scrimmages because they scored the 2 Duke games as 2 different games. Drew Lamphere, I think, is going to get a lot of playing time. Him and Sosa, I think, are both going to be in the lineup. One I think is going to catch, and then they're just going to, and one's going to DH, and then they'll just kind of trade off there. Mark is more excited about Nixon while everyone else was more excited about Micah being here. Mark does not care about Micah.
Yes, you're not getting some Lamar baseball gear.
No Teeth Bird baseball hat, Micah.
That's Lamar, not Louisville, by the way.
This is Lamar. Go Cards. The real Cards.
Oh, geez.
The team that almost made the NCAA tournament last year in baseball.
And then Trenton Lyons.
I still love you, Louisville.
Trenton Lyons, an Ole Miss transfer. He went 3 for 8 with 2 doubles. I really like what some of these guys got. Jake, what were your thoughts on some of these numbers? I mean, Alex Sosa did what Alex Sosa does. Braden Frostman, he didn't have the best game in the second scrimmage. I mean, he went 1 for 3, or excuse me, he went 0 for 4, but he was a big spark plug against Duke.
Were you in attendance at this game?
At Elon, yes. I've seen all of NC State.
So when did they flip Nixon to be at shortstop? Just because I see in your notes they moved him over.
So
and what do you think kind of the plan is with Nixon?
I think he's going to be at base. He's going to be at second base. DeCrisio is going to be at short. When DeCrisio came out of the game, Nixon played short. I'm trying to remember if he played. He definitely played short in the second game against Duke, and I'm trying to remember if he played short against Elon or not. Justin Cook, if you're still in the chat, please remind me if he played short or not. But he was definitely the second shortstop behind Justin DeCrisio.
I really like Justin DeCrisio at shortstop. I think if he can kind of slot in there as Micah, I think if he can kind of slot in and get them quality at bats position, I think that's going to go a long way for NC State. But again, from a lineup standpoint, I don't think there's a lot of pressure on him to hit 300. Like they have a few guys, I think they can kind of bang the ball around, like you mentioned, Luke Nixon and Alex Sosa. But I mean, I think Trent Lyons is the one that really kind of jumps out to me. He has a bounce back game after he struggled in that Duke game. Comes out, sees the ball a ton better. I think that's credit to him to kind of flushing that one and moving on. But I mean, just what a box score. I mean, for again, it's Elon, it's not Duke, but taking care of business. And again, the pitching, we'll get to the pitching here in a second, but just an incredible lineup and tons of pop around the lineup, it seems.
Yeah, and again, that's without Hogue and Jaros hitting quite yet. I really liked what I saw from Ty Head as well, the freshman who could be in the conversation to start in center field. He had 3 really hard hit baseballs. And again, I think they're going to run a lot. Darren Vaught over at D1 and I were talking about this, and I think he mentioned it on his podcast. It looks like NC State is going to run a lot to generate some offense. I mean, in the first 2 innings, they had 2 stolen bases and a perfectly executed hit and run where Ty Head had a 101 mile per hour line drive through the hole to score a run. And I really like what they're trying to do, that Elliott can kind of adapt his strategy to his personnel rather than just trying to continue to do the same things year out, year out. year in, year out.
I think that's where Elliott Avent as a coach does his best, is when he is able to do hit and runs, when he does feel comfortable with guys stealing. And again, that's not to say that last year's team, I mean, obviously they ended up in Omaha, but that was the one thing that I felt that they kind of lacked, is it felt like they always needed to get multiple hits to get guys home. And again, they got it a ton of times, but I think Elliott Avent being able to call hit and runs, button runs, I mean, there's a ton of team speed this year on this team. This is going to be an exciting team to watch.
Yeah, now we're going to move on to the pitching, because the pitching is, I love NC State's pitching. I think they've got, right, it's going to be between them and Stanford, I think, right now, and UNC for the best pitching staff from top to bottom in the ACC. It's tough to really narrow that down this early. Again, we thought some things last year about that, and that didn't necessarily end up being the case for some teams. So it's going to be interesting to see. But, I finally got to see Duden. I got to see Consiglio, and we got to see Derek Smith, and those guys just did nasty things. I mean, Duden came out, was pumping 99 a couple of times, and had an RPM near 3,000. I think it was 2,800 on his slider. And he struck out the side. Consiglio had 3 strikeouts. He did have the one walk, but he looked as good as he is. And then I've been really impressed with Camden Wimbish and Jackson Lucas, 2 guys who are making that's let me just make sure I'm correct on Wimbish here. I think they're both making that freshman to sophomore. Yep, both making that freshman to sophomore year jump, and both have looked extremely impressive in both their outings that I've seen.
Yeah, I think the one thing that really jumps off to me is you kind of have the pitch counts here. I mean, there's a ton of guys that just pound the zone. Aiden Noles, 19 pitches, 9 strikes. Carson Kelly, 7 pitches, 6 strikes. I mean, this is a deep, deep pitching staff that is attacking guys. Again, which I think what you want to see out of fall games. You don't want to see them mess around. You want to see guys attacking the zone. Cooper Consiglio, like you said, really, really attacking the zone. He only had the 1 walk. Derek Smith had 2 walks in 1 inning. But I think that again, when you get down to the bottom of the lineup with these guys, the pitching is going to be hit or miss. But the top end of this NC State pitching staff is really, really elite. And I'm sorry for any NC State people, as I caught myself there. So that's not a Jakeism.
By the way, I think you've got. The back of their staff is Consiglio, Duden, and Smith.
I meant
Asian.
I meant like from a depth standpoint. Like when they get into a game, obviously they don't need 10, 12 pitchers. So that's kind of more what I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
I didn't know if they were. I thought they were in alphabetical order, Monty. So that's my bad.
No. No, it's just kind of how they went in. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how these guys went out. I didn't even mention Heath Andrews and Carson Kelly, who've both looked good. Schaffner, who's had nasty stuff. I just thought Wimbish and Lucas in their 2 starts have just been electric. I didn't even register the velocity that Wimbish showed, because all of a sudden I was looking up and he was hitting 96, 97. And I was like, holy crap, is that normal? I had to text somebody and be like, he was doing that against Duke? Because I did not realize he was throwing that hard of velocity at Duke as well. But
he has a very fluid motion that I feel like, and again, this isn't like an insult to him or anything at all. It's actually more of a compliment, is it doesn't look like he's overthrowing when he pitches. So it kind of almost surprises you that it comes in that hard from like a good standpoint, because his mechanics are so good.
Yeah. So NC State is about done. They've still got fall ball a little bit, but their scrimmages are over. As I think most of the teams that we're talking about, their scrimmages are for the most part over. They'll have some inter-squad still, but moving along to the team they played last Friday, who had their scrimmage again on Friday at the USA complex. Duke facing Charlotte. It ended up being 9-6, I believe, after 12 innings. I really liked what I'm seeing. I'm starting to see. I think I'm most confident of a team in terms of a projected lineup. I'm feeling pretty good about what I think Duke's is going to look like.
Yeah, but to be fair, Monty, they do have, I guess, the clearest question marks from a lineup standpoint. Obviously, what their right side of their infield is going to look like.
Left.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Think about that for a second. So it's like, yeah, I guess the left side of the infield.
You're like the one that makes an L is your left.
Yeah, I guess, you can get me for a Jakeism there. How are my boy Wallace Clark and your boy Ben Miller, how are they kind of looking in the fall so far? Do you think that, Wallace is kind of starting to get up there in years a little bit? Is there kind of, an age thing going on now?
Well, I mean, both of those guys could have been drafted. Pollard talked about it in his post-game interview. I've got a clip of his that I'll show off here in a little bit, but I don't have the clip where he addresses those two guys, but it's really nice because he was mentioning that last year he didn't know where they were going to slot those two guys in. This time last year, he had Ben Miller playing first and he had Wally at third. He said it wasn't until a couple weeks right before the season started that they ended up sliding into the positions they ended up at, with Ben at third base, Wallace at shortstop, and Zach Morris, who's since gone on, moving to second. But he's really good, has looked really good. I really like what I saw from those guys. Those are the two guys that are going to hit at the top of the order and kind of set the tone. But I mean, that 1 through 4 is really, really going to be fun.
It's loaded. I think it's one of the best in the ACC.
Well, and it's probably one of the more underrated ones because you're going to see Miller and Gracia, but you're going to underrate Wallace Clark, who just gets on base. I mean, he gets hit by pitches, he takes walks, he makes things happen, and he did that in the number 9 hole last year. And then you've got Jake Hyde, who was a top player in the Big East last year, and he looks like he's playing first. It'll be interesting to see if Sam Harris can kind of force him back into the outfield, or if Sam Harris goes to the outfield. Not sure what the situation will be there, but it's looking really, really good.
Yeah, I was gonna say Gracia is obviously going to be the guy that steals all the headlines. I mean, we're already kind of seeing it a little bit with your coworker from Prospects Live, Tyler Jennings, who just seems to rave about Gracia, and I think the hype is warranted for him as well. I think he's going to be a guy that you slot in, and again, there are very, very few programs in the country that'll have a center fielder batting third and a shortstop batting leadoff. Who do you think kind of Pollard puts in that second leadoff role that he did last year with Wallace Clark in the 9 hole? Do you think he puts Berger there? Because
that's what's interesting. Now, again, you have to think about Kyle Johnson in this situation because he is going to be playing both ways. He's going to be DHing when he's pitching, and then he might be playing some left field at opportunities. He could be that second leadoff guy down at the bottom of the order. It could be Jake Berger because you'd have that veteran presence down there. Harvard transfer. Tyler Albright's another guy who had a pretty good freshman year, and then started the year last year opening weekend, and then very quickly, was moved out in favor of some other competition. But he's had a great fall, had a great summer. He could regain his starting role, and he could be that second leadoff guy that you saw Wallace Clark be last year.
Yeah. Again, he's got a very intimidating name, but Nick DP
Trantonio.
How has he looked as he kind of makes that step up from Ivy League? I know that I haven't heard any intel on him, but he was a very big transfer for them. Hit 293 at Princeton last year. Another kind of Ivy Leaguer. I mean, it seems like it's like, when did D1 Power 5 college baseball turn into like Wall Street? Like, it feels like there's just so many Ivy Leaguers that are now on these power teams. Like, numerous names.
Yeah, I mean, he's looked okay. I mean, I think Hyde and Rounds and Berger have just looked so good, and then you're kind of getting into an embarrassment of riches here with how you have your lineup. Because, like I said, there's also Harris and Murray and Albright, guys who've had really big summers and returning, and then you've got DP Trantonio. You've got Jimmy Evans, who hasn't gotten a chance to hit. So you've got a lot of guys to talk about. And actually, I've got a clip that I'm going to play real quick of Coach Pollard talking about some of this depth. It's under a minute, so it won't take very long. We'll talk about it right after we get back.
And one thing I like, we've got better balance right now, right left, than we've had offensively in a while. I really like our the guys that went away and played in the summer. Tyler Albright went and had a great summer. Noah Murray had a great summer. You mentioned Sam Harris. So those guys are coming back. They're pushing. We've got some young freshmen that are playing well. You saw 2 of them up the middle today, and Andrew Bell and Jeff Luigi. And so I do like the fact that we're depthy, and we've got a nice balance because we've got some fifth-year guys that have come in and shown that they're going to really give us some offensive firepower. But we've got some returning guys who, like a Kyle Johnson and an AJ Grassi, who had really good moments offensively last year, obviously, both of them freshman All-American. But then you got some returning guys that went and got better. Now they're pushing, and you got the freshmen, and so it's a good mix.
Yeah, I mean, I asked him. I thought that this was a even deeper team than last year, and it was a pretty deep team last year offensively. But shout out to Trevor saying, great looking coach. Handsomest man on
I like that Duke D that was on his shirt. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
very, very clean looking D.
I should have asked for it, but yeah, no,
that sounded really bad. I meant the letter.
Yeah, I knew what you meant, but I was gonna just skate over it, and you had to go back to it. But no, I love Pollard. He's a fantastic coach. I think he's gonna have a lot of fun trying to figure out that lineup and who's gonna sit in there, because he's got a lot of options. And it's going to be a lot of fun to figure out, because it looks like to me, if based off what I've seen, I think it's going to be Clark, Miller, Grazia, Hyde, Rounds as your five, and I think it's going to be Winslow or Andrew Yu in 6, Albright 7, and then you got to figure out the situation if you've got Kyle Johnson DHing. And then Jake Berger 9. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But for the most part, I feel like I've figured out who most of their, I think, going to go with. But they've got some options that they're probably not going to really decide on until right before the season.
Yeah, even then, I think that they're going to be one of those teams too. Do we have their schedule at all? Who they open up with?
No, it is. I know who they open up with, but it's not public knowledge.
I was just saying, it could be a scenario too where they kind of play around with little stuff early in the season. Almost doing kind of like a midweek on Saturday or midweek on Sunday. I know we've kind of seen that for a few teams in the past when they play inferior competition. Obviously, I know they're not going to be at one of the Texas tournaments, so I'm going to assume it's inferior competition. But from a pitching standpoint, where do you kind of see them going? Obviously, you have Healy as the Friday night guy written down.
I don't think Healy's going to be the Friday night guy. I think he's going to stay on Saturday. I think KJ is going to be the Friday night guy.
I kind of like that, actually. I think that, why. And then it's one of those things, too, where the ACC does so many Thursday series that if they do kind of get into a little bit of a pickle or something like that and they want to switch them, I know that is a lot easier to do in the ACC.
Yeah, what's going to be interesting for Duke is trying to figure out who that number 3 starter is going to be. They're going to have, again, some options. Now, if Jordan Schaefer had made it to campus without being drafted, he was one of the UNC Wilmington guys. Obviously, Calvert's the other, but Schaefer probably would have been that Sunday guy with all that experience. He ultimately ends up getting drafted. He never plays at Duke. He made my Cape Cod All-Star or made my Cape Cod graphic for Duke a bunch of times, never pitched for Duke because he got drafted. But you've got a number of guys. Aiden Weaver could be that guy. Gabe Nard could be a dark horse option for there. He got stretched out a bit in the summer. Reed Easterly could be a guy. It's just, Ryan Calvert, the other UNCG guy, could be it. They've got a lot of options. It's going to be interesting to see what they go with and who they decide on. Ryan Higgins got some options starting for them as well, but I think they like him out of the bullpen a little bit more. But a really intriguing arm I wanted to touch on that I've been really impressed with, and I've got to remind myself because it's a lefty wearing the number 12. It is not Jonathan Santucci. It is a freshman named Henry Zatkowski. And he's looked really good. Let me see if I can find the comment that Trevor posted earlier. There we go.
Does he have a motion like Santucci, or is it at least a unique?
No, he's so big name on campus has been the new pitcher Henry Zatkowski. He's being compared to James Talon. He's looked really, really good in his 2 scoreless outings. Really, really good stuff from a freshman. I'm trying to remember what he was coming in at in terms of the freshman class. Let me look here. I've got all my notes all over the place before we talk. And I mean, he wasn't really even like getting much attention from PG. I don't even have him on my notes. So we didn't even.
He was. Let me see. Sorry, putting in. Unranked nationally. 500th nationally, 4th in the state of Maryland, and the number 1 left-handed pitcher in the state of Maryland.
Yeah, so
a little bit of love, but again, 500.
Yeah, and they tend to rank everybody 500 if they're unranked, I feel like. So they do the top 5.
The 81st left-handed pitcher, so that would I assume that would probably well.
So he's an under-the-radar freshman that could get big innings, and I'm not going to post what Kane's Cats Heat just said, but I'll say that he said, "I'm telling you, these rankings don't mean anything." I censored it for him.
Perfect game is not definitely the gospel with me and Monty.
Yeah, like they said, Henry Ford was literally ranked in the thousands, and he's looking like a first-round draft pick this year because he is a draft-eligible sophomore. But yeah, lots to love about Duke. I'm excited. I should be able to see them again when they play in their Fall World Series at the Coombs, which I'll get to see some of what their renovations are looking like as well.
You have to let me know how those renovations look. I'm pretty excited. The renderings look really, really good.
Yeah, and it's going to take 3 years for the whole thing to go. So I think the first thing right now is just the dugout. So I don't think it's going to look necessarily too impressive year one, the changes. I know it'll be great for the players, but the good stuff's going to be kind of later. So anyway, moving along to Florida State. All right. First, I'm going to shout out Brett Nevitt. Neither Jake nor I were at this wonderful scrimmage in Pensacola, Florida. I had a couple of sources giving me some information, but a lot of our information is coming from 247 Sports' beat writer Brett Nevitt, who is fantastic. I mean,
I feel like we were there. Like,
yeah,
this is probably the ACC game I get the most eyes on.
Yeah, so he provided video, he provided play-by-play updates, scouting updates. They did a podcast on their drive back to Tallahassee, I believe. So shout out to him.
Herb Street style.
Yeah. So yeah, Jake. I mean, before we get into it, real quick, Auburn did win both games. Auburn took game 1 4-1, game 2 9-5. Both 7.
Yeah, but I mean, it's fall. Stuff can get kind of a little bit weird. So fall is fall. So take it with a grain of salt. We're talking about this pre-show. I think the biggest surprise is Gage Harrelson being in left field and Max Williams being in center field. If Gage can play left field, I think that sets up really, really well for Florida State from a defensive standpoint. And again, both these guys have a ton of pop. They barreled a ton of balls in the scrimmage. Gage Harrelson's a talented lefty bat. I think he was one of the best names in the portal coming from Texas Tech. Very rarely do you get guys with this kind of experience that enter the portal. Tremendous get. It seems like there's been no growing pains in the move to Tallahassee or anything like that.
Yeah, and it was interesting how Link decided to go with these lineups as well, because you'll see a lot of teams kind of go with who they're thinking as their A team, and it was interesting to see that some Drew Farreau, for instance, was not part of the game 1 starters, and he's going to be your starting second baseman. But I think because of the way they like their shortstop play, I think they have Lodis and they have Farreau as their shortstop options. I think that's why they put Farreau to play game 2, because he was going to play shortstop instead of second base, but. The first lineup for Florida State was Harrelson in left, which, as Jake just mentioned, was a bit of a surprise. I thought he was going to be in center, Max Williams in left. Either way, both guys were in the lineup. But when Harrelson, Lodis, Max Williams, Cal Fisher coming in at third base, which is what I expect him to be. I didn't necessarily expect him to be in the leadoff or the cleanup spot, but I did expect him to be at third base. Jackson West, the catcher. Hunter Carnes DH'd. That must be wrong. I think they must have flip-flopped because Carnes definitely threw somebody out in game 1 as the catcher. So
yeah, I was just saying that's in my notes.
It might have been Jackson West DHing, Hunter Carnes catching, Miles Bailey at first base, Brody D at right field, and Jace Estes at second. So they had 3 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman in that game 1 lineup.
Yeah, and I feel like we should almost give Miles Bailey like the Gavin Grahovic asterisk treatment because he does not look like a freshman in any sense of the word. He played all 14 innings. He is a big guy with a big power bat. But I think the one thing that really impressed me is a lot of these freshmen that come in with these big bats, bigger guys, not necessarily speed guys, they tend to want to pull off of things and kind of show off a little bit in these games. But he showed great power to all the fields. He really kind of ran the bases a lot better than I expected. And again, it sounds really bad to say he is an athletic big guy who uses the entire field. And it was really impressive because it was an approach well beyond freshman. He didn't look like he was in his freshman fall scrimmage kind of breakout moment against an SEC school. He honestly fit in a good way.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing about him. I would have loved to have seen. I saw some of the videos that we saw, but yeah, I mean, he had a 105-mile-an-hour single up the middle off Cade Fisher, who's going to be a big-time day one draft pick. Maybe not first round, but a day one or day two guy. And then
I should say the middle. That was more middle towards short as it kind of curved, and so it was towards second base. But again, I think that I would kind of consider that like oppo middle as he kind of. It really kind of drove it late. That was the one that I was referring to.
Right. And then he had the RBI single in the second game, but he also walked twice both games. So
yeah,
he was on base a bunch. And he's got all that pressure on him. But the other freshmen, I mean, the two freshmen playing second base looked really good. Jace Estes was the only guy in the first game to have multiple hits. And then Noah Sheffield, who is the son of Gary. I mean, he had he missed a home run, I think, that went foul just barely, and then he had a ground rule double and an RBI single and looked really good.
Yeah, and he hit it to the warning track on the ground rule double. I should say, again, I'm going to show my age a little bit as I wasn't really around for Gary Sheffield, but the swing is still just so like unique to me. Like it literally looks like he's always going to be like 5 or 6 seconds late when he's swinging because it's such a long one, but once he kind of gets his hands in position, I mean, you can kind of tell the hands do a ton of work. He didn't pull off of that ball to right field as the one that he hit was an opposite field one. I think at most stadiums, I think that's actually a home run. I think at Florida State, that's likely a home run too as well. Just kind of big enough for the ballpark to hold it. But you kind of mentioned Hunter Carnes behind the plate. I mean, he had the throw out. He looked really, really good. Both sides of it because Lodi's picked on the back end, but it was a very, very quick pop time. If I had to guess, it was probably a sub-2 pop time. And Lodi's kind of bailing him out. But, I mean, he didn't even move his glove when he went to do the pick. Like, it looked like something that, like, would go on at, like, Banana Bowl or something. Like, it was just a tremendous throw.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this Florida State team. The young guys they've got, because they've got a number of redshirt freshmen on both sides of the ball as well that didn't play last year that are going to get opportunities, as well as these true freshmen. I'm so excited about it. And then Chase Williams, the JUCO transfer, he led off and played center field in the second game. He's in the center field conversation and the starting outfield conversation. He probably has the best offensive performance of the day with a 3-for-4 outing and an RBI and a stolen base.
Yeah, he has super quiet hands. He has a short, quick swing that, a lot of these JUCO guys are like, okay, how are they going to translate? I think his swing translates tremendously. And again, he's another one of those speedster guys that can play in center field. Like I said, I think we see him as more of a corner outfielder, if not a fourth outfielder. But again, the bat is playing early on, and it looks like Link Jarrett's going to have to make some tough decisions in the outfield.
Yeah, it's a position battle that we're going to talk about later on in the fall here, because we're not going to talk about position battles today since we've had so much content. But the pitching on the other hand, you had some standouts and you had some guys that didn't have the best days.
Yeah, let me pull up my notes. Sorry on the.
No, you're fine. I'll start. To me, one of the guys I wanted to highlight right away is Jacob Marlowe. This is a guy that transferred over from UCF before last season and ended up having open heart surgery in the fall, which kept him out all season long. He came back in the Cape and did really well up there in the Cape, and in this scrimmage also looked fantastic. He retired all 4 batters he faced and just 1.1 scoreless innings. I really loved what I saw from him. I think he's going to be a really key piece out of the bullpen for Florida State.
Yeah, the one that I have is John Abraham. He threw the 1 scoreless inning. He did allow the 2 singles, but I think that they were it was a gritty outing for me. It really kind of impressed me a little bit from the notes that I saw is he didn't have his best stuff. Obviously still threw up a 0. He's the one that really kind of showed out. And then Connor Holtz down there. He's another one that kind of worked his way out of a jam to not allow a run. I think those are going to be two very, very important arms for Florida State going forward. Obviously, they're not going to be the high-end kind of lead the guys. But, again, if they can get depth out of these guys that can save them innings, it is going to go a long, long way. Because I think, again, I don't think they have a bad pitching staff by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feel like this team is going to go as far as this pitching staff takes them.
Yeah, and Holtz could be the first chance at closer, as he was kind of the eighth inning guy last year for Oxford. But I really, you brought up Abraham. Brady Lauk is another one for me. Those two guys, they were freshmen last year, making the jump as sophomores. I keep mentioning it with a bunch of teams. I think they're both going to make a big jump between freshman and sophomore years and be really important for this pitching staff.
Here's a guy that we kind of touched on last time. And I wanted to kind of see what you thought about him so far. Mason Martinez, the transfer coming over. How do you think he slots into this pitching staff as we kind of seen him a little bit in the fall going forward?
He's a reliever. I mean, VCU, what they love to do with Brian Curley, who's now at Georgia, and Mason Martinez, who's now at Florida State, is they really had one starter on the mound, and I'm sorry for forgetting his name. He graduated, but he pitched outstanding against Wake Forest in the regional in that upset. But the rest of the weekend would typically go with openers making way for Mason Martinez and Brian Curley. And Martinez is really, really good out of the bullpen, had a monster season for VCU. And I think his transfer went a little bit under the radar. I think Brian Curley got a lot more recognition going to Georgia, but I think Mason Martinez is just as good and can be just as effective for Florida State as Curley will be for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, the opener, I think, is a very popular thing with schools like VCU. And again, I think Mason Martinez can it's kind of weird that his role at VCU is going to be a very similar role to Florida State. A guy that can just kind of eat innings out of the bullpen and really kind of save the back end arms going forward.
Yeah, but yeah, I think there's a lot to like about what Florida State did. One thing I found interesting that Brett and his co-host Aria brought up when they were talking in the podcast on the way back. Sunday Golds, by the way, is the name of that podcast. If anyone's interested in listening to Brett and Aria's podcast, very popular Florida State podcast. But they talked about, and I think Link addressed this in his post-game comments, is it didn't really feel like they had the fire for this fall game against Auburn, and the fight wasn't necessarily there. And if that's the case, I'm still pretty impressed with the performance by those guys if that wasn't there.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of guys get on base, and I think what Link is saying is a little bit of the complacency kind of setting in. Again, it's the fall. There's still a lot of position battles. I could kind of see what Link was talking about, but Christian Gordon. Yeah.
Thank you, Trevor McDonald. I was sitting there. I was like, I cannot think of the guy. I kept trying to think of Aiden Hill, who was an outfielder for VCU who transferred to Maryland.
But there is a ton to like about this Florida State team. I know that I was a lot higher on them last year than you were in our kind of preseason rankings. I might have them even a little bit higher than I had them last year, and I had them at 5th in the ACC.
Is that just because you think the pitching depth is better than it was last year?
Timeout. I think that, I mean, obviously we didn't know we didn't know a few of the guys that they got tremendous contributions from.
We didn't know about Jamie Arnold.
Yeah, we didn't know about Jamie Arnold. So I think, I mean, again, the last team went to Omaha. So the ceiling of it was, but I think preseason, there's a lot more on paper here this year. That doesn't necessarily. That is true.
That's a good point. I mean, they had a ton of guys that are redshirt freshmen this year or redshirted because they were injured all last year. So that's a good point. Cam Later,
Link is for as much as UVA and UNC kind of go in and get these under the radar guys. It feels like Link goes and gets the guys that are ranked the best in the JUCO ranks.
That's what I was going to say. They are benefited, I think, by how strong the JUCO game is in Florida, and they can get those guys, and they don't have to go very far to recruit these kids. And I think that benefits them. I think there's 4 or 5 JUCO guys on the roster that 3 or 4 of them could make huge impacts.
Yeah, I mean, Florida is a hotbed for talent from a high school rank, from a JUCO rank. I mean, Jose Batista went to that JUCO that's like 15 minutes down the road from Tallahassee. So you really don't have to go too far. I mean, you can almost like fall into talent in the Florida region.
Yeah, and Link is taking advantage of it, and it's paying off. I mean, Marco Dinges was a JUCO guy last year that came in, so, but that's. I mean, I don't have anything else to add on Florida State, unless you do.
No, I mean they're going to be a team that we talk about a ton.
And even though we didn't see them, I wanted to make sure we talked about the scrimmage because we were able to get a ton of information again.
Yeah, that's the team I know the best about. The transformation of Florida State, and again, I don't think it's going to be complete until that trophy gets lifted. But from where I saw them in 2022 to where Link Jarrett has them in October of 2024 is truly an impressive feat, and it's not an easy feat to accomplish at all. And it's been a very, very quick turnaround, and they feel like they have the most talent in the ACC. They might not be the best team, but they might be the most talented team in the ACC this year.
I mean, you said it's the team you know the most about, so I don't know how you can judge the other teams based on that.
I think from a ranking standpoint, from a draft standpoint, there might be somebody I'm overlooking, but they feel like they have the most talent in the ACC.
I mean, it's hard to say. It might be true. But the other impressive thing about what Link has done is they did it a lot on the back of guys that he didn't necessarily have to bring in, like James Tibbs and Jaime Ferrer. He was able to take those guys and build success on them and then bring in guys around them, and that's just so impressive. But
yeah, I mean, he's like I said, it was a very, very quick turnaround.
Yeah,
down in Tallahassee, and the fans really deserve it. They showed out for like a crappy game against Virginia Tech. So I know that the fans in Tallahassee really do deserve it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but that's going to do it for us. We're going to talk real quick about some quick notes around the ACC. Pitt, they started their scrimmage season at Cincinnati. They split the two games. Pitt won 10-8 in the first game and then lost 7-2 in the second. Not much information coming out of Cincinnati for that.
I think the only information I was able to find was that Cincinnati hit a home run. Other than that,
yeah. Cal, Miami, and Georgia Tech are in the middle of doing heavy intra squads. They've started that. Then Louisville, they're in the middle of their Fall World Series, what they call the Pizza Bowl. It's currently 3-2 in favor of Team Red. I'm jealous of people who are getting to go to those games because apparently all 5 games have been decided by 1 run or in extra innings.
Yeah, and Louisville is a team that definitely, I mean, as we saw last year with the line changes, I would love to take in a Louisville inter squad. I feel like it's a very balanced game, and they really don't have to try too hard to balance it out.
Yeah, and one of the position battles I want to talk about there is their outfield because they have legitimately 6 or 7 guys for 3 outfield spots. But Patrick Forbes, who I got to interview and who I have been already putting as, a dark horse for ACC Pitcher of the Year, in his 2 games in the Pizza Bowl, he has 9 innings pitched, 1 hit, 1 earned run, and 12 strikeouts. He is looking absolutely fantastic. And then lastly, Notre Dame, Pitt, Miami, Virginia Tech, and Virginia all have scheduled scrimmages against other schools this week. We'll start with Miami since Canes Cats Heat's already doing my job for me. Miami plays FAU on Saturday, and then we've got Notre Dame has 2 scrimmages back-to-back days. One is versus Purdue Fort Wayne. One is at Northwestern on 10/20. Virginia Tech finishes up their scrimmage season with Liberty on Wednesday the 16th. Pitt, which I will be at. I will be in Pittsburgh on Friday against Mercyhurst on the 18th. I'm going to be doing a facilities tour, interviewing Devin Mazzaraco and Coach Mike Bell. It's going to be a great time. There's going to be a lot of content from Pittsburgh. As you guys know, that's a program I love. And then UVA, I will also be at that one. They are home at Maryland on Sunday the 20th.
I'm excited for you to go see Pitt, man. You'll have to go check out Gene's Place. One of the best, I think, college bars in the entire country, Monty. Gene's Place down there in Oakland and Pittsburgh. But
we'll have to see. I'm getting Permanente Brothers. I gotta figure out what it's like to have from French fries.
Yes, you need to go to the one in the Strip District. Don't go to one of the chains. The chains are basically like a glorified Chili's. The one in the Strip District is the one.
All right. First of all, Chili's is fantastic.
I went to a Chili's on Saturday.
No, you're the person who goes, I hate chains.
No, I love Chili's. But
is Chili's not part of your chains like hatred? Chili's is like the exception.
Chili's is one of the few chains. But again, Chili's at the same time is a chain.
It is.
And the Permanis and Strip District is worth going to. The Permanis and Moon is not worth going to. It's just basically like a crappier Chili's. But from a Pitt standpoint, I mean, there's a lot to like. It appears through some of the scores that we've seen that the offense has kind of risen to the occasion a little bit. Obviously, they're going to have Luke Cantwell and a few of the other guys there. But, I mean, banging out 8 runs against Cincinnati is going to win you a ton of ball games if you're Pitt, because that seemed to kind of be their Achilles heel last year.
The 12 runs against Cincinnati in 14 innings because they won the first 110.
Yeah. My bad.
But we got lots of content coming this week. We've got Aiden Kanak interview tomorrow night. We've got Estevan Moreno of Notre Dame on Thursday. I've got the content from being live from Pittsburgh on Friday and live from Charlottesville on Sunday. And Jake, you got anything going on?
Yes, I will either be at Houston to watch their inter squad. For you ACC people, Carson Sabathia is now with Houston. So
is Riley Jackson, who was at Florida State.
Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of see them. I might go see Mississippi State on Friday, but it's starting to look like Houston is going to be more likely. I will be seeing Texas A&M the following week, and then Rice as well. But again, I'm excited to kind of hear some of the notes that you see out of some of these ACC schools. Obviously, Maryland is a former ACC school, so really kind of excited to see where they fit. As you know, they have great historical rivals with Washington and Oregon, but excited to kind of see them going forward. And again, I'm just excited to see all the content that comes out of this. I really kind of do feel like an insider just by following you, Monty, and Grace as well. Like, there's a ton of ACC content coming out. I haven't really seen a lot from the SEC side from beat writers going forward outside of Texas A&M. Again, the Texas stuff is coming. The SEC stuff is coming. We're just kind of waiting for all the dust to settle a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a great year. I can't wait. 2025 is coming, and we're already talking ball. But we'll be back next week with another show like this, talking about some of those scrimmages that I talked about this week that are coming up. We've got a lot of fun stuff. I cannot wait to talk about some Pittsburgh baseball and some UVA baseball and some of the other schools as we get information about them. And we've still got interviews coming. I mentioned Aiden Kanak tomorrow. I mentioned Estevan Moreno on Thursday, but I've got Drew Burris next week. We've got Max Williams. We've got Jaron Vincula. We've got some good stuff. So that's going to do it for us today. Jake, if you don't have any other final thoughts, we're going to let everybody go and say see you next week.
I think just see you next week. I'm just excited. ACC has me all amped up, Monty.
Yeah, so we'll see you next week.